What's up, everybody? This is your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga, here to bring you another video with no frills, just the analysis. And today I'm here to bring you the Season 1, Episode 2 review of Tron Uprising entitled The Renegade Part 1. And apparently, they've already released the Renegade Part 2 on the Disney website, I believe it is, but I haven't gotten a chance to check that out yet. But just before I get into the review of this episode, The Renegade Part 1, a couple of things I have to go over. First is, I'm going to try and get these Tron Uprising reviews out on Friday. But there's no guarantee that I'll be able to do that. The reason being is because I don't actually have the cable channel that this TV series comes on. So I don't have Disney XD. And on top of that, since I don't have Disney XD, I have to download this episode, and there's no guarantee that these episodes will be available for download in a timely fashion. And on top of that, if I'm not able to get the episode by Friday so that I can review it on Friday, then you probably won't be getting this episode review until Sundays, perhaps Mondays sometimes. So I'm telling you straight off, for all of you people who, are watching this episode review, that I might not be able to get these reviews out in a sort of timely fashion that you would expect generally, because The Legend of Korra comes on Saturdays, and I really don't want to upload 2 videos on the same day, especially since the other one is so important to this channel. That's The Legend of Korra takes priority over Tron Uprising, simply because more people want me to do that review than Tron Uprising. So, yeah, might not be able to get these out in the general amount of time that you would expect from me. So, just letting you guys know right off the bat about that. So now that I've gotten that out of the way, let's get into this episode review. I just have to mention the aesthetics again. And I know I did this in my first episode review of Tron Uprising, but the aesthetics are freaking ridiculous. They are ridiculous. Now, I downloaded this episode in HD, so full HD quality. And I have to say that the visuals on Tron Uprising are the best visuals of any animation currently on TV, and probably the best that I've seen in a while. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And it's not even necessarily the quality of the artwork, but how beautiful it is. The combination of the colors, the choreography. It's just stunning. Absolutely stunning. So you can tell that they worked on the sort of look, the aesthetics of the show. That they really put a lot of time and energy and thought into this. And also, just like I said before, a very, very fluid combination between 2D animation and CGI. And that combination is just used to absolute perfection. Even the details in the background, like if you look at some of the panoramic scenes with how they use CGI, the detail in the panoramic scenes are just mind-boggling. Really, really, really mind-boggling. So now let me get into the summary and analysis of this episode. So the episode begins with Tron training Beck. He's training Beck to obviously be the next Tron. And he's teaching him about motorcycles and how to ride motorcycles effectively and how to use them in a fight and basic riding techniques. But particularly, he's trying to teach Beck how to use some techniques to use the motorcycle in a fight without using the light glow. I believe that's what it's called, the light glow. The light glow is the trail of light that comes out the back of the motorcycle and that you can use as a blockade and as an obstacle to knock other people off their motorcycles. But this is how the episode starts, and Tron is trying to teach him in order to prepare him for what will probably be his ensuing fight with Tesla. And one thing about this show that I'll be talking about a lot is the psychology, the psychological aspects of this show. And one thing that we see during this training, we're trying to training Beck, is Beck's reoccurring uncertainty about the level of skill that he possesses and whether or not he'll actually be able to live up to Tron's expectations of him, and whether or not he'll be able to live up to his own expectations of himself. And at one point, Tron is training Beck, and he wants him to ride his motorcycle over a crevice or sort of canyon. And this is not no small canyon, obviously. I mean, this canyon is pretty big. And Tron rides over the canyon like it's nothing. And we see Beck's hesitation, and his hesitation almost gets him killed, just right in this sort of opening scene. And a lot of what we're seeing here is that Beck's uncertainty is being used by the writers as a sort of impetus for his character development, and especially for his psychological character development. It's sort of laying the foundations of his characterization, because the uncertainty here is very, very interesting, because sometimes Beck has amazing courage that allows him to do unbelievable feats when he's pushed. And at other times we see him still struggling with the doubt that he has for himself and about the uncertainty of his own skills. And so I really, really like the psychological aspects, the psychological angle that the writers have used. And what they're really exploring here is the sort of what you might call the psychology of a revolutionary, or the psychology of a freedom fighter. And one of the recurring tropes, not tropes, but one of the recurring, well, that's kind of redundant, a motif is a recurring theme, but one motif that's constantly ever present is encapsulated in Tron's sort of quote that he uses for Beck. And he says, you can surpass your programming. In other words, you can surpass your own limitations, that the reason why you were designed, that you don't have to be confined to the programming that was designed for you, that you can reach beyond those limitations. And so I really, just really like the sort of psychological angle that the writers are using here. After this training scene is over, Beck is on his way home, and he runs into some of Tessler's troops. And this is what really kickstarts the rest of the episode. Apparently, Tessler has instituted some curfews, and he's also instituted some roadblocks to, obviously, he doesn't want people moving freely throughout the city without his knowledge. And in order to get away from these troops, Beck has to hide in these sort of what appear to be shipping containers. But when he gets inside this shipping container, he realizes that there are other programs imprisoned inside of these shipping containers, and that he's on a one-way track for the games. Yeah, things are about to get really ugly here for Beck. So the shipping containers are taken to the arena where the games are staged. And it reminds me of the Roman Colosseum. It's just like the Roman Colosseum. And what's interesting is that historians have written about the sort of relationship between the Romans and violence. And I think some of what historians have written about the Roman Colosseum is exactly applicable in this scenario. Because the games themselves are all about the psychology of violence. And not just the psychology of violence, but in particular, it's about how programs are forced to fight to the death. And so in a way, they are sort of forcing people to participate in their own oppression. They have to be complicit, because they can obviously choose not to fight in these games. The obvious alternative is that they'll probably be killed on the spot, but they do have a choice not to participate. And if they choose to participate, then they sort of become complicit in their own oppression and in their own domination. And so I think that this is, again, a very, very interesting psychological angle that the writers are using here. And it's a very good narrative technique, I would say. And so yeah, the games are all about this sort of the philosophy of violence and the sort of psychology of violence. And for anybody who's interested in reading up on this some more, there's two books that I would recommend. One is called Slavery and Social Death by Orlando Patterson, and the other one is called The Deathbound Subject by Abdul Jahan Muhammad. So if you're interested in the sort of philosophy and psychology of violence, I would definitely recommend that you pick those books up. But anyway, so Beck is, fighting in the games, and he's there with about 6 or 7 other programs in a group together. And they fight in the games, and only Beck and one other program survive. And actually, now that I think about it, I'm not even sure that the program who survived along with Beck even has a name. But I know his voice actor. I can't remember his name, but I know he plays Cedric Daniels from The Wire, if you're familiar with that TV show. But what happens is there's a very, very intense scene during Beck's fight for survival in the games, where a program named Rilo gets killed. And this is something that's also a very, very interesting aspect of this show. So let me just take a brief detour, a brief tangent, sort of. And let me talk about de-resolution, or de-resed is the slang term that they use in the show Tron Uprising. So de-resolution refers to when a program is killed or deleted. And since we're dealing with programs here and not real people, when a program gets deleted, it's not really, killing. And so this allows the writers a lot more freedom to kill off characters that they wouldn't normally have if we weren't dealing with, computer programs, and if we were dealing with real people. And I really, really like the way the writers are using this freedom, because this is the second, not even the second. I mean, now that I think about it, off the top of my head, I can list there's got to be at least 5 deaths just in the first 2 episodes. If you're talking about Rilo, the guy from the last episode who helped Beck stop that container from going to the games. I mean, there have been several deaths in this series. And I think what dealing with computer programs allows the animators to do is it allows them to provide a sort of psychological intensity with these deaths that would not normally be possible in a children's show. Because even in The Legend of Korra, for example, on Nickelodeon, the writers in that show, Brian and Mike, once referred to the fact that Nickelodeon wouldn't actually allow them to kill off their characters. And so a lot of deaths in not Legend of Korra, Avatar The Last Airbender, rather, had to be off-screen because they couldn't show it. But here, since we're dealing with the deletion of computer programs, they can get right up close and personal and actually show character deaths. And so this de-resing not only adds a sort of dimension of psychological intensity to the show, but it also adds a dimension of realism to the show that you wouldn't normally see in a, TV show geared towards, children. And so in real life situations like this, where you have revolutionary figures trying to fight against oppression, people die. And in this series, again, people die, even if they're just being deleted. And so, like I said before, Rilo is one of those characters who gets de-resed. And his death was particularly heartbreaking for me. And I will use that word heartbreaking because I am sort of connected to these characters through the fact that I know there's a very real possibility that they might not be around for long. But Beck promised Rilo that he would survive and that he would save him and that he would stop him from being deleted. And Rilo still gets deleted. And he just does, and it's the way the writers show his deletion. Rilo is about to be killed by somebody coming from behind, and Beck calls out to Rilo, "Hey, watch out." And right before his eyes, Rilo gets de-resed. And so this is very, very heartbreaking for Beck, obviously, because he promised Rilo that he would live. And so part of this episode sees Beck having to deal with the sort of psychological aftermath of him being unable to keep his promise to Rilo. And so again, the sort of psychological aspect or angle that the writers are using, they're approaching this from multiple directions, through character deaths, through Beck's uncertainty. So it's not just about the physical, the imminent physical threat of Beck being deleted. It's about how, from a psychological standpoint, that every time he has to witness a character's death, that there's some aspect of him psychologically that's being deleted. And so we get to see them working with this symbolism and metaphors of de-resing throughout the show, which I think is just absolutely fantastic writing. And after Rilo gets deleted, Beck and the other program, the one other program who survives, is sent back to their cells, because the idea, and this is just very, very sick, the idea is to keep these programs fighting for their lives until they eventually die, which is, you know, very sick, like I said before. And so having to deal with the aftermath of Rilo's death, Beck starts to spiral again into doubt about his own abilities and uncertainties. And here's this motif again where he tells the other program, my programming wasn't built for this. And here's where things get a little philosophical. The other program starts talking to Beck about hope and about sacrifice. And he points out that it's only because of the renegade. And at this point, there's a sort of dramatic irony here, because this program doesn't know that it's actually Beck who's the renegade, who's been impersonating Tron. But this other program tells Beck that it's only because of the renegade that people are still fighting against Tesla and against Clu. And he points out the fact that humans, that hope is sort of contagious that way, that if one person is able to stand up and fight for freedom, that eventually other people will find the sort of hope that they need to stand up and fight for freedom as well. And so what we have here is a sort of discussion about how humans or programs are always willing to sacrifice themselves for the possibility of hope. And we can obviously see that this is true, because from a sociological standpoint, not just a psychological standpoint, but a sociological standpoint, humans are social animals, and we do things in groups that we either couldn't or wouldn't do individually. And sometimes that's bad, at least the bad things like mob mentality, but sometimes it can be an absolutely redeeming feature of humanity, because that sort of contagiousness of hope is the sort of stuff that revolutions are made of. And we can point to, you know, a myriad of examples throughout history which proves this point. And so I really, really love what they're doing with Beck's character, and how he's constantly having to oscillate between hope and despair, because it really is a very realistic psychological depiction of how someone would act and feel in this sort of position and in this sort of situation. So Beck and the other program, they attempt to escape from the games to obviously try and get out of there before they're killed. But they almost immediately get recaptured, and they're sent back to the games. And Tesla wants to make an example out of them, so he wants to make sure that they don't survive. So he has them fight in a game against unbelievable odds, where Beck and the other program are chained together, and they don't have any weapons, and they have to fight against people who do have weapons, and they're on motorcycles, and so they can use that light glow. But somehow Beck and the other program survive. And this comes back to another motif in this episode, now that I'm thinking about it. Another motif about the contagiousness of hope. And so after they survive this, Tesla remarks that this insolence will spread like a plague if we don't kill off these programs. And so they make Beck and the other program fight again. But there's a twist this time. Beck and the other program, who have been sort of using each other to get through this situation, now have to fight each other to the death. And the major twist is that the winner gets their freedom. They'll be released from having to fight in the games. Wow. So I'm really looking forward to see how this situation is resolved in the next episode. But also there was some stuff that happened with Zed and a bike being stolen. But honestly, I don't really care about that. If it turns out that there's something more to this subplot about the bike being stolen, then I'll mention it in later reviews, but I don't think it's that important right now, so I'm not going to touch on it. And yeah, I just really love the psychological aspects of the show. The writing with respect to Beck's characterization and even the characterization of the other programs from a psychological standpoint has been spot on and amazing. And it looks like I really hit on the gold mine here when I happened upon this series. So, and also big shout out to Manga Reader Z who actually reminded me, because I knew this series was coming on, but I had forgotten it. And it was Manga Reader Z, a fellow YouTuber, who reminded me about this. And so, yeah, I just can't wait to see where they take Beck's character development from here, because, like I said, it's really, really good writing. And so, yeah, remember that I can't guarantee that these reviews will be out in any sort of timely fashion. Really, really sorry about that. But I just have a sort of space in my schedule where things get smashed together and I don't have the channel. So, but yeah, thanks for watching anyway. So this has been your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga. Just brought you another video with no frills, just the analysis. Peace and have a blessed day.